I remember Jimmy specifically saying, "Marvelous comrades," and that is what we need. That's our biggest prayer request right now, is that people would gain a heart for Orlando and the nations. Hi, we're John and Nicole Criali, and we're planning Antioch Community Church in Orlando.
In September of 2011, I received a call to plant Antioch, Orlando. Did not know the city of Orlando very well at all. Actually, I've never really been even in downtown Orlando or even in the campus of UCF. But I knew I had to meet with this man named Jimmy Seibert, who is the leader of all the Antioch churches in the area, and he would have to sign off basically on this church plant. And so met him in 2011 in October, right off of 436, right near the airport. He flew in just for a day to do some golf event with his son. And he said, "Hey, I have about an hour and a half with you, and so I'd love to hear your vision, love to pray for you." And so I remember sitting with him thinking, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm actually planning a church. We don't have a team, we don't have any money. We really don't know what we're doing, and I've never really been on campus even one time to even see where we're planting and even know the city we're planting in." And so I remember talking with him and just giving him a vision about seeing people being transformed and people that would love Jesus with all their heart and be a family and be on mission. And so got to share my heart with them. He's like, "Yep, I think that's great. I think that'll work. I think you should plant the church." And I was thinking, I wanted to reach over the table and just like take his shirt and be like, "You don't even know me. Like, you don't even know who I am. There's no way you're gonna, like, I don't even know what we're doing. I don't even know why I was asked to do this by my pastor in just a month prior in Chicago." And so he said, "No, you know what? I know a church planter when I see him, and I'm gonna pray for you, and give me a map." I gave him a map of UCF. I was like, "Please pray for us." And so a church was technically birthed right there. But then I knew the moment was gonna come. We actually have to get on campus. We actually have to share the gospel with people and see a church be birthed. It can't just be in theory, but it has to be concrete and practical. We need to get to know the people that are there and invite them into a vision, invite them into something, invite them into a place where they can actually raise a family and reach their city. And so we were driving along Alafaya after an outreach on campus. It was just my family at the time, and we hit the intersection of Alafaya and Chapman. And I remember just looking up at the light, and we were praying, where should we plant? You know, it's about 3 miles from campus. And I looked up, and there was a sign that said that Oviedo is the top 10 places to raise a family. And so I was thinking, no way, this is awesome. I can't believe this is great. I wonder what the other 9 are, you know? And I remember thinking, you know, it wasn't an audible voice or anything, but it sensed from the Lord, this is what we're supposed to plant. From Ezekiel 37, he gave us this vision of the valley of the dry bones, where, if you remember in the story, God was telling Ezekiel, he's saying, "Look at this valley and look at all the death, but I want to bring these bones, these dead people to life. I want to breathe life into them so they become an army for my own purpose, for my own glory." And that's exactly what God did. Every time coming on this campus, you know, I think we could get really discouraged, and even today maybe get discouraged in how lost the campus is. You know, I mean, imagine, you know, coming on campus, we did not have a church, and just believing that God would give us that vision, that strength from Isaiah 55 of calling people we don't know. And we've called so many people. Yes, people have come and gone, but we have a very strong church now, and many of the college students are now married, and now they have kids, and they're a part of our leadership team. It's absolutely incredible. From this vision of just continuing to not necessarily prophesy, but preach the gospel that these people that are lost will be found. And it's exactly what we got to see. And there's still so much more to come. And so if you're a college student today, just continue to pray for your campus, share the gospel faithfully, and disciple. I remember just right here in front of me, or behind you guys is Barnes & Noble. We got to do so many discipleships here. And what was really cool about those days early on was that when we were sitting and having discipleship with 2 or 3 of the guys, we would see so many people. There's something about familiarity when you get to see people who are there on Sunday morning. Maybe they were coming for the first time or the second time. Then you get to see them on campus. You say, "Hey, why don't you join us? Why don't you come and sit down with us? I want to know a little bit more about you." It was right here that we did our first rally night in January 2013, where a team from Chicago came in and they went around the city and shared the gospel. And later that evening, I was asked to do our first rally night. And I didn't know what I was going to speak on. I remember being quite nervous that morning, walking around and just pacing back and forth. And they let me into the conference room early. And I remember going in there and just crossing the threshold and breaking for this city and breaking for the people on this campus. And I'm like, Lord, are we actually going to get a church off the ground? I just didn't know. A lot of things were up in the air at that point with the church plant, and this team from Chicago just simply wanted to help out and share the gospel. And I remember walking in later that night and just sharing three important things that are still so true and important to our hearts today. That is to love God with all of our hearts, love one another, and to love those who don't know Jesus. All right, so our first service of Antioch Orlando is in Watson Reel, actually right behind us. Unfortunately, it only lasted a week. We were too loud, we got kicked out. And I remember thinking, where in the world are we supposed to meet as a church? We had about 40 people at the time. We had critical mass. Everyone was telling us now is the time to actually meet as a corporate body. And so I remember calling John Evans, asking the Lord, please give us favor. Many people told us that, doing services in schools were being way too expensive. We certainly did not have the money in the budget for that. And so we went on a limb and we just said, Lord, we need your favor. And so I remember calling them, left a message, they called us back. And to my surprise, they actually said that they were waiting for a church to come in for 13 years. And so we were an answer to their prayer, unbeknownst to us. And so we're just so thankful that God gave us that place for us for 7 years. We were there from 2013 to 2020. We had an incredible time there. This was the first time that we actually got to meet as a corporate family. We had been meeting in life groups at the time. We got to meet with Jesus. We got to pray for one another and have extended times of worship. Those times were so sweet. If you were to come to John Evans on a Sunday morning, you would notice one thing. It is a college church full of young people, alive and vibrant, hungry for Jesus. So thankful for those early years. We're such a tight-knit group. We do discipleship at each other's houses. Spent a lot of time actually in people's houses because it was geared around life groups and fellowship and discipleship. In fact, a lot of times, even after service, some of you may remember of 70 people walking across the street and eating Little Caesars pizza and salad from Costco, if you remember those days. It was a lot of fun doing seminars on dating. Yes, doing seminars on dating, doing leadership development, and learning more about how to follow Jesus passionately. So I was so thankful for those early days. Not only Jesus family, but also missions. During that time, we got to go on mission, not only to Miami about 4 or 5 times for Awaken Miami. That was our college mission trip. But of course, it wasn't just the college students. The whole church would go on those trips. And it was a lot of fun. And we got to teach the church and how to do missions with one another and how to actually be a family in the morning and pray and worship together and then go out and share the gospel and then do team time again at night and share testimonies. And not only that, but we got to go overseas. We got to actually see the world together. And during this little time here, these 7 years here, we got to go to Ecuador and Mexico, and we got to go to Colombia and Uruguay and Japan and all over Europe. It was Paris and Amsterdam and many different places, Belgium, during the European crisis in 2016. Just an incredible time together as a family that is continuing even today, many years later. So the Lord gave us this vision that the first 5 years were going to be foundational years. Here we would focus in on the 5 rings of the church, meeting with Jesus, discipleship, life groups, Sunday service, and missions to the world. And we have done those things well. We started our school, ADS school, and where we would meet on Sunday nights and even go deeper with those resolves and the mission and the vision of God that He gave us for our church. But the second 5 years were going to be growth and maturity, and we definitely felt that. That's when we hit COVID in 2020. All of us had to meet inside, stay inside, and we had to cancel service. In fact, the school called and said, you no longer can meet. I remember that second week after we came back from New Orleans in March, and said we can no longer meet there because of COVID. And so we had to go into Zoom and see all those little squares and see each other. At least we got to see each other somewhat. It wasn't as bad as I thought. It was 2 months worth of being away from each other until the Lord opened the door to go to Fountainhead and to meet together again. And that was so much fun. If you remember, we were packed like sardines, 200 of us all in there all at once. And COVID ran through our church multiple times, and the Lord has been so faithful to us. But he matured us during those years. He grew us stronger and knit our hearts even more to the Lord and to each other, strengthened that resolve, stayed on mission. One of the things we kept saying throughout the last couple of years is that Jesus is our bullseye. He is the reason why we meet together. He's the reason why we're here. He's the reason why we are saved and have a church and have salvation. The second part of that is we're better together. We're actually better when we meet together and we fellowship together and we disciple one another. And the third thing is we need to stay on mission. And that was one of the things that the Lord put on our heart during COVID, is that we did this crazy thing in October 2020. We took our whole church, 140 of us, got on Spirit Airlines, and we went to Detroit, Michigan, and we shared the gospel door to door in the cold weather in a Muslim concentrated area there. It was such a blast seeing our people do that. And then the second place that we went to is Miami, and then DC, and then San Francisco. Again, it just prepared us for overseas mission, and we then got to go to Rome just in the summer of 2023. During COVID, God opened up the door to leave Fountainhead and to move into Oviedo High School. And we are there primarily for 5 reasons that the Lord was showing us during that time. Number one, it's on 601 King Street. Not that that has any real significance, but the Lord had shown me through 601 King Street 5 different things. One, King Jesus. This is why we meet. We want a reminder again and again and again. Every time you guys, whether you drive on 419 Broadway, at the center of town, or whether you take Lake Jessup Road and turn left by the Methodist Church, whatever route you take, eventually going to get to King Street. And that is a reminder again why we meet as a church, why this church even exists, is because of Jesus. Number 2, Isaiah 60 verse 1, arise and shine, for your light has come, the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For behold, darkness will cover the earth, and deep darkness the peoples. But the Lord will rise upon you, and his glory will appear upon you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. You know what? Nations have come to our light. Nations have come to our church, and we've hosted many people from around the world. It's been so fun. But not only that, it's a dark place. Oviedo is a wonderful place to grow your family, but it is also darkness. There's people that don't know the Lord. This is a great verse to remind yourself again, arise and shine, for your light has come. God has put glory on us for such a time as this. The third reason is 601. You know, this is a place we can grow. If you've seen the auditorium, look around, look to your left, look to your right, look behind you. There's a lot of spaces for people still to come and to be a part of our church. And so invite them, pray for the lost to come. So we have new conversion growth, not just church transfer. We don't want that. I mean, that's great, but we want new conversion growth. We want people to know Christ for the first time and be a part of our church. Number 4, gives us a heart for our city. We're in the middle of town. John Evans is on a little bit on the outside of Oviedo, but center of town is Oviedo High School. So it's just a reminder again, we're in the heart of our city. We're growing in our city, and we want to actually put the stake in the ground and say, this is a place where you can grow your family in Christ. Number 5, there's a lot of work, right? We don't have to actually put chairs away like we did at John Evans. Don't you miss those days for you guys in the earlier days? But it's a perfect place for all of us to continue to grow in service of one another. You don't just walk into Oviedo High and turn on the lights and turn off the lights. You can't just rely on the custodian, but on one another. We've grown, our truck has grown in size, our people, new faces are always coming in to our church, and people are becoming family, which is an incredible thing. This is a place where you can find Jesus, follow Jesus, and actually become family and reach out to those who don't know and invite them in. God is building a transformed family who seeks Jesus with their whole heart, serving and honoring one another with humility, grace, and joy. We are a family who live on mission. By making disciples of all nations with the gospel, we do everything through his word and by his spirit, working until Jesus comes back, all for his glory. This is who God has called us to be. In short, Jesus has called us to be a people who seek him together on mission. And you know, it's not easy to do that, but it's such a joy when we actually get to do that. But not only that, but God has called us to do that every day. He said, go and make disciples. That means as you go, make disciples naturally. That means like sharing the gospel with the people in your neighborhood. It means sharing the gospel with your mail lady, or sharing the gospel with people at Publix or at Aldi, wherever you live and whatever your 3 to 5 is. Do that well. Saturate the city. Own your city. That's what God has called us to be. He's called us to do that 12 years ago, back when we started the church, and we're still the same people today. And I'm looking forward to being the same people, if not more transformed people, in the years to come. Standing here in Oviedo, Spain, or a lot of you guys would call it Oviedo. This is exactly where we got our name in Oviedo, Florida from. And some cool things about this city is that it's about 15 miles from the beach, and in northern Spain, it's the capital of this region called Asturias. And some of the cool facts here is that it's the greenest, the cleanest, and the safest place in all of Europe, even some say. For sure Spain, but all of Europe. And most of Spain is pretty arid and dry, and but this region has a lot of rainfall. We're pretty high in elevation too. Just as we drove here from Portugal, it was just a beautiful drive. It was incredible coming into town. It was actually kind of funny when we were on the highway. Just kept seeing Oviedo, Oviedo, Oviedo as we're getting closer to the city. It's just so great to be here. One of the things that, as I was doing some research, that caught my eye was that this was the only province in the entire region that fended off the Moorish invasion in 700 AD. This city was founded in 761, which is probably roughly around 1200 years before our town in Florida was founded. But something cool is that these guys, they wanted Christianity to remain. They put an anchor in, they put a stake in the ground and said, we will not cave to Islam, and while the rest of Europe caved in. And so it was just so cool to see even the fact that I wonder, can't prove it, but I wonder if why that maybe the fact that this is the safest. And it says that 94% of the residents here say that this is a great place to raise a family. And I'm just reminded of that time when I was along Alafay and Chapman there, and we were planning the church in 2012, and it just said 9 out of 10 best places to raise a family, a clean city. They have a lot of parallels. It's just so cool to be here and finally see it for myself. In 1875, roughly after the Civil War, there were a bunch of people trying to find land to start a new life. Nelson Steen led the charge. He took around 40 families and settled what was known as the Lake Jessup community. They began the citrus industry, and unfortunately 20 years later, there was a massive freeze that killed the industry, and they had to switch gears, and they started the celery farming because of the rich soil. And roughly around that time, there was a man named Andrew Allen. He came into town and he needed a post office. He needed a name for the city, what we know today as Oviedo. But there was a little bit of a fight. W.E. Alexandria, he and Andrew Allen, they kind of went head to head. And of course, Alexandria, he wanted after his last name, and Andrew Allen said, hey, I know of this city called Oviedo. Because of Florida's Spanish roots and Oviedo's Spanish roots, they just said, hey, this is a great fit. Why don't we name it Oviedo? And so that stuck. I think it changed to Oviedo as we know it today, but it was a university town. In fact, I'm standing right in front of this amazingly beautiful city in Oviedo, Spain, and the university is right behind us. And so it's a university town, and so Andrew, supposedly history says he went there, he loved it, fell in love with it, so he said, hey, I want this city in Central Florida to be named after it, called Oviedo. In 1912, the settlers needed some help, and they got some help from some people from Slovakia, which then migrated over to Cleveland, Ohio. And then the people of Central Florida opened up their arms and said, hey, we could use your guys' help. So they came down. The people in Slovakia, they didn't want their families to grow up in the big city of Cleveland. because of all the temptations and the worldliness. And so they came, and the very first thing that they did was plant a church. The original church is still standing today at St. Luke's Cemetery. There's a small little church gathering, probably about 4 or 5 pews in there, and right across the street from the new building, St. Luke's, right off of Chapman and Aloma. You guys have probably sat at that light many times to see it. It's an amazing place. Just again, so thankful for these people that said they want to keep Jesus at the center. What I love about these guys is not only did they want Jesus at the center, they wanted to plant a church and they wanted to influence the city, and they did it. They did it with their lives. It was so cool to see, as in researching, seeing that the discipleship and family and community were so important to them. In fact, family-wise, they wanted to gather all the churches together, the Baptist, the Methodist churches that are still standing there today off of King Street, and in St. Luke's, and many of the churches there, they gathered for May Day. They gathered twice a year, May Day and 4th of July, and they got to do a big old picnic, pray together, eat together, fellowship. It was incredible. Second thing that they did was they did discipleship. They figured out a way to, in the neighborhoods, for the older to invest in the younger. Way to go. I mean, they wanted to invest in the next generation. They wanted to do family together. They wanted to keep Jesus at the center. They wanted to keep the influences of the world out. And we're blessed, church, as a city. We're standing on their shoulders, literally. Their ceiling is our floor, and we feel that. But you know what? In 1960s, or roughly, UCF was birthed. And we sought that when we planted the church in 2012, which is roughly around 100 years later when they finally got the name Oviedo. And it was just so cool to see that 100 years later, God put in our hearts, just like they did, this was like those early settlers, and said, we want to influence this city. And we said that university is precious, where many people are wasting their lives and coasting through life and living for themselves. We just said, no, not in our city. We want to see God move through these students. We want to see them not only educated well, but discipled to use their gifts and talents and join a church and be a family pursuing Jesus to go change the world. As I was praying and doing this video, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, because I want to inspire the next generation, our church, to continue to stay in the game. In 1925, Oviedo got its first mayor. Next year, 2025, will be officially our 100th year anniversary of Oviedo being incorporated. Church, what is it going to look like in 2125? 100 years from now, what do you want it to look like? We got to look forward. We got to start with the end in mind and then pull backwards. I can't help but think of the early settlers of Oviedo. They planted churches. They said, we're going to put the stake in the ground. We're going to be a pillar of truth. We're going to want to influence businesses and the cities and neighborhoods for the gospel. And you know what? They also did this. They loved each other well. They were unified with other churches in the city. They wanted to be together. They wanted to hang out and invest in the next generation. You saw the older always pouring into the younger. We got to continue to do that. If we want to be in this thing, we got to pursue Jesus. We got to invest in the next generation. We got to be people that are all about loving each other, community and family. And the fourth thing, we got to be about mission. I would just, again, I would again admonish you guys, don't just sit around. Invest in the next generation. Be on that campus, not just the Monday nights that we do, but all the time throughout the week. When you see students come through those doors on King Street at Oviedo High, welcome them, take them out to lunch, be with them. This is our heritage. This is our people. It's in our blood. It's in the soil. And not only that, but I love this about Oviedo, Spain, right behind me. These people were the only ones that fended off the Moorish influence. The Islam took over most of Europe, and they said, no, not in my city. Again, if we want to be a people who are in this thing for the long haul, not only are we a people that got to pursue Jesus passionately, not only we got to be a people that love one another well and invest in the next generation, invest in cities and nations and changing the world, but we cannot allow sin. We cannot allow the corruption of the world to distract us from these amazing things that God has called us to do. Church, let us decide now. Let's put the stake in the ground and say yes to Jesus. Let's say no to the world. Let us be a people about Jesus, family, mission, because God will use us in this generation. I believe it with everything that I got. I believe it. We've been all over the world, guys. We've been in many different nations, and way to go with that. But the best is yet to come. And like Ronald Reagan said, the plane is waiting for us. Isaiah 55 is one of my favorite verses, and it's our church's theme since the very beginning. It says in the beginning, it says, oh, it's an exuberant expectation of joy that God is at work. And why is Isaiah so excited? Because he's realizing that although we are all so sinful, although we are all estranged from God and we're running away, we're doing our own thing, God has a plan for his people. He even says this, says, incline your ear and come to me. He's talking about God. He's saying God himself is saying, come to me. I'm the only one that can actually satisfy you. Delight yourself in the abundance. I will make an everlasting covenant with you. And he has. When you give your life to Jesus, he is making an everlasting covenant with you from now until all of eternity. He's promising to stay with you. He's staying with us, church. He's birthed this thing. It's his. And I love this. Behold, you all know this verse. Behold, you will call a nation you do not know, and a nation which knows you not will come running, because God has put glory on us as a church. He saved us for this time, for now, this season, this time, for a reason, for a purpose, to actually reach a city. And I love what he says here. He says he will abundantly pardon. If you have any question of that, maybe your sin is so great that he will never be able to forgive you, you're wrong. God will abundantly pardon, because he says this, my thoughts are not your thoughts. We don't think like God. God is amazing. He's infinitely great. It says that in Romans that our sin abounds, but grace abounds even more. Your ways are not my ways. And so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. And this word, which we preach in the nations, which we preach all over the city, it will not return void. It doesn't return void in our life. It actually makes a difference in our life. It will not return empty. It will accomplish exactly what God said it was going to accomplish. It is going to save people. It's going to sanctify people. And ultimately, this promise, we'll find out in the end, he will glorify us. And I love what it says here, that here's a promise for us. And I want to land here in verses 12 and 13. It says, for you will go out with joy, and you will be led forth with peace. So many people today have no joy. They're walking around joyless on campus, in our city, in the nations. They have no peace, but God has put his glory on us, and his glory is that we are at peace with God, and we're at peace with one another. We're full of joy because we walk in the power of the Holy Spirit. Isn't that amazing? And then this is the fruit of a people like this, a people that have Jesus' peace, a people that have the joy of the Holy Spirit. It says, instead of the thorn bush, a cypress tree will rise up. That is a testimony of God's power. Cypress tree is powerful. You could see him all over Central Florida. Every time you see it, let it be a reminder of his power in your life. He has saved you. Remember, first generation? You came here as 18-year-olds. Your lives have been transformed. How many more that God wants to transform in our city? The second thing he'll do, instead of the nettle, instead of this place of pain and irritation, he's gonna raise up crepe myrtles. You could see that all over Central Florida as well. They're beautiful. It's a sign not only of God's power, salvation, his mighty hand to save in your life, and then also it's a sign of his beauty. That's the sanctification process, that he's making you more and more like his son Jesus. Beautiful. And it will be a memorial to the Lord. It'll be for his glory. That's why he planted this church. He wants glory in our lives. And it will be an everlasting sign that will not be cut off. Church, this is our mandate. This is our call. This is the picture of transformation, and there's more to come.